I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? At some time or another, most of us have felt like Emily Dickinson. But usually we're able to find something to hang our identity on, right? I'm a 20-year-old biology major. Or I'm a masochist because I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. But most of us realize that our identity runs much deeper than the labels we place on it. Over the past couple of years, I've started to understand how much deeper. Excuse me.
We're supposed to have a scheduled break for 5 minutes.
You've probably been told that you are the sum total of every decision you've ever made.
We'll have it again with you.
And that's a pretty good definition. But I think it goes even further. You are, in addition, the sum total of every decision and life experience of your ancestors. I was lucky because my dad was an amateur genealogist. He spent years figuring out the family tree. Now, most of the people in that family tree were run-of-the-mill. They were the kinds of people who do most of the living and striving and suffering and dying in this world. He did find, though, that we descend from a patriot, an ancestor who fought for American independence. In addition, he found that we might be tangentially related to Sam Houston, the first and third president of the Texas Republic. But again, most of them were anonymous people living a hardscrabble life in the hope that their kids would have a better opportunity. Those hard times extended into my father's childhood, growing up in St. Louis during the Great Depression. Before he died, he spoke quite a bit about those experiences. And he said one day he went into the cellar and he was shocked and scared to find his father sitting in pitch black darkness, consumed with depression because he couldn't find work. He said there were days that his mother would be near tears as she fretted about how she was going to feed the family. I'm here because they persevered. My mom's side of the family is cloudier, and that cloudiness extends over traumatic events from her own childhood. She was among the 120,000 Japanese Americans who were unjustly incarcerated for the crime of ancestry. 81 years from this coming Sunday, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which allowed for the forced relocation of all Japanese Americans from the West Coast, including American-born citizens like my mom. She was barely 7, and she never liked to talk to it up to the time she died. She kept it to herself. So over the past couple of years, I've been trying to excavate and reclaim her story, and I hope ease her pain. So I went to Sacramento, and with the help of a friendly librarian, was able to discover the location of the family's farm. I went to Fresno, which was the first stage of their forced relocation at a place the government called the Pinedale Assembly Center. And that sounds like a non-denominational church, but it was a prison camp, surrounded with barbed wire, guarded by soldiers with machine guns. From Fresno, I drove to the middle of the Sonoran Desert to Poston, Arizona, which is where her family spent the rest of the internment. There's not much there now, but at the time, it became the third largest city in the state of Arizona. Of course, it was a prison city. But that story wouldn't have happened if my grandfather hadn't played hooky one day in Japan. He and some friends skipped school, they climbed a mountain, they looked out over the Sea of Japan, And my grandfather vowed then and there that one day he was going to cross the Atlantic, or excuse me, the Pacific, wrong ocean. Several years later, he did. He worked his way over on a whaling ship. And when that ship docked in the U.S., Grandpa melted into the landscape. He took odd jobs. He worked as a ranch hand. He finally ended up in Kansas, where he worked for the railroad. He saved up his money because he wanted to have a mail-order bride. So my family story is possible also because my grandma was willing to marry a man that she never met, cross the Pacific herself, and begin a new life with him in his new venture as an onion farmer in Stockton, California. A couple years later, they moved to Sacramento. They had a family, 4 kids. My mom was the youngest, and then Pearl Harbor happened. It occurred to me that my story would not happen if it hadn't been for the internment. Because after they were released from the camp, my grandparents decided to go to St. Louis. If it hadn't been for the internment, they would have stayed in Sacramento. Mom probably would have married a nice Japanese boy, and I would not be here. So many things had to happen for me to be here. So many things had to happen for all of you to be here. Within each one of us run mighty rivers of ancestry, fed by thousands of tributaries. Each one of us is 1 in 7.8 billion. So, I'm somebody. Who are you? I think you're somebody too. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.